much for coming this evening. So my name is Nancy Wang, and I'm the founder of Advancing Women in Product. So often question asked is, where did you get the inspiration to start Advancing Women in Product? And the answer to that question is, I've been involved in enterprise product management for several years now, and every place I've gone to, I've always Cool. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So every place I've been to, always been, one of the few females on the team, and so that's a status quo I don't want to be the norm in the next 10 years for women entering the product management career field. So that's the impetus behind starting Advancing Women in Product. And since 2017, we've now grown to over 3,000 members in not just the Bay Area, but we're also having a chapter in Seattle, launching chapters in Paris and Berlin, and hopefully around the country as well. So with that said, really excited to have you guys here tonight for how to scale B2B SaaS products. And I'd also like to introduce Kanika Kapoor from the Advancing Women in Product team to introduce this event that she worked so hard to put together.
Thanks, Nancy. Hey, my name is Kanika. So I'm going to talk about our event today a little bit. As you can see, the event's name is Scaling B2B SaaS for Hypergrowth. So today we're going to learn about trends in the cloud market, what it's like to innovate for hypergrowth in this market, and we have all our panelists and moderators here. As part of the event today, we're going to learn how to build technical products from strategy to execution and forming multi-year roadmaps, and also make sure how our SaaS products are future-proof and what it means, what growth means in enterprise or B2B space and strategies to achieve it. So let me talk a little bit about our upcoming events. So looking at the events here, we're going to have a couple of really exciting events in 2018. The next one's going to be Executive Buy-in Strategies in Plaid SF. Growing Markets for IoT Products is also going to be in SF and Samsara. And the next one's Building Your Influence Within a Large Company. Last one, Dress for Success. We also have a podcast, in Masters of Product podcast right here. So the agenda for today is it's almost 6:53, so we're kicking off this South Bay chapter. Nancy introduced us all to the South Bay chapter today. We're going to have panel discussion and question and answers right after, and then we're going to network and close right after that. And I wanted to introduce our panelists today. Wanted to start with the moderator, Judy Chang here. Judy is a senior PM or product manager at Google. Judy has in-depth experience in product management, product marketing, business development, and enterprise SaaS, consumer internet, payments, billing systems. She's leading key products at Google, previously was at PayPal. She'll be sharing her experience in defining and executing on multi-year product strategies. So welcome, Judy. Yeah. Actually, also, just going to introduce some panelists here. We have Shay. Shay is the SVP of Product Rubrik. Nikita here, the Director of Product Nutanix. Aakrit, the VP of Product at Applitools, before which he was at AppDynamics. And I also wanted to let you guys know that after the panel questions and answers, you guys can also enter your questions in Slido. And the Slido ID is right there. So you guys can enter your questions right here. If you guys have questions, then these guys can answer. They'll be happy to
also be passing mics around as well. So.
Yeah, in addition to that. All right. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy, for inviting me here today. And Shay and I used to work together 15 years ago, so we know a lot of each other's secrets. I'll be pulling them out of them today.
You promised.
I know. So the panelists here have such great enterprise SaaS experience, and I'm curious if you could each tell me about how you define a successful SaaS B2B product, and what are some of the trends you've seen in this space. So let's start with Shay.
Okay. So I had the pleasure of working with Judy 15 years ago, and we back then it was enterprise software. It takes like a year to roll it out. On premises, and but even then we knew. I remember a project you worked on around customer experience. Do you remember that? You went out with a designer and sort of reimagined what it means to price for a internet service. I mean, these were revolutionary things we were doing back then. But there was a sense that customer experience is important. I mean, today it's not just important, it is foundational. Things are so fluid, and if you don't have a maniacal focus on delivering an exceptional customer experience, and that means understanding the full customer life cycle, helping customers get to value quickly, helping them through a personalized journey, then I think your traction is just not going to be as strong. And so, to me, that's one really important trend.
Thanks everyone for being here. One question I'm curious about before we get into this is how many folks in here are today already working on a B2B product? Okay. So we can, as we're talking about it, we'll also relate a bit to some of the consumer things. My background at Nutanix, we actually did start as an on-premise product, and over time we've been on a journey to actually over time also become a SaaS product. And the things that I've noticed across both sides is a few things. First, on-premise, as Shay mentioned, it's very easy in terms of product to think it's about features, but it's really the end-to-end experience. Install, right? We have a huge team dedicated to how quickly we can get the product installed, right? The second is design, and we were just talking about this earlier, but design in many of the new enterprise companies has actually become a first-class citizen, right? We're hiring some of the top designers because people have expectations for enterprise products now for the design to be just as effective as it is on their consumer products, and why not, right? Especially as enterprise products move from on-premise to SaaS. The third area I'd say that's been interesting for me to see more so as we've grown as a company is how, as you add new products, so for us we've been starting to acquire more products, how easy do you make it for customers to actually try those products and cross-sell and upsell within product? Right, so I think the stickiness of a product is really about how people can feel compelled to use additional features, and doing those seamless integrations, I really feel like is the next age of enterprise product.
Great, thanks, Shay. So again, welcome everyone, and great to be here. I'm very supportive of the AWIP mission, and I think so. When you think about SaaS, and I primarily work most of my enterprise software career in SaaS-based services and companies. There's been a lot of examples of companies that have done really well in the SaaS space, and so I think learning from them, understanding what's really worked well for them, has been around building a model that is a low touchpoint solution that's flexible and easy and has a lower barrier for adoption. And so I think companies that have a really good go-to-market strategy and a product adoption around keeping it simple and flexible and easy to use and easier to adopt and deploy. I think those are companies that have scaled really quickly. And then if your software is very complicated or involved, then there's a different kind of a go-to-market strategy that you see with companies in the SaaS space. So it's interesting because you're starting to see more and more companies become SaaS-oriented. I mean, if you look at some of the data I looked at from a company called Profitwell, showed that 2013 there was about every SaaS company had about 2 to 3 competitors. Today it's about 8 to 9. So the SaaS market is starting to explode, and it hasn't even peaked yet. There's going to be a lot more growth in this market coming. But some of the trends that you'll probably start to see is there may be some more modularization of services based on more value-based kind of pricing and packaging SKUs. You may see more on security. GDPR was a big thing this year, but there'll be a lot more around privacy and data protection. That's going to be a big play in the SaaS field. And people are probably starting to get more and more open to like more hybrid deployments and infrastructure. So it's interesting, but there's a lot of very novel trends coming up, and as the industry is starting to kind of continue to accelerate and grow, we also saw some numbers in our research around, and some of the research I did in the space around the fact that when companies initially get traction and they get to like 3 to 4 million ARR, then they start to see a lot more acceleration, and that's because of the SaaS cloud model that allows them to get users hooked and invest in the solution, and then continue to increase the value that they get from the product.
So just to follow up to what you were saying about ease of use and great experience, can you each think of an example of a company that has done this really well? That's not called Salesforce. Give us an example of why you think they've done it well.
So I can kind of just kick that off. I mean, so I would do Salesforce, but I did work there for several years, and I saw them kind of like really pioneer this SaaS notion, and then companies that are now basically doing this for the enterprise, companies like Zora, for example. Initially, the founding team came from Salesforce, and now starting to really evangelize and help every business become a SaaS-based, subscription-based business. I would say, a company that has done really well, in my mind, probably Atlassian. Atlassian comes to mind because if you think about how fast they've accelerated and grown. I mean, there's certain product areas where they didn't get as much traction, like collaboration, and so now, Slack came up and that kind of took the market share. But for developer tools and for ticketing systems and deployment, continuous integration, their Bamboo service, Jira, and they're, obviously with Bitbucket, they got into the source control management. So I think they had a very organic strategy to grow and scale within the developer persona that started to kind of resonate and become an end-to-end solution for their core audience. And I think that made the product very sticky. And so their users got hooked, and you couldn't really, it became a solution you couldn't live without. So I think they had a very kind of organic growth strategy in the SaaS space, and they also did a very good job of making the product very easy to use, friendly, and in that sense kind of promoted the virality of it within the enterprise itself to get more users to it.
Just any product or something?
Yeah, what's an example to you of a really great use of SaaS product?
So in my day-to-day, I know there's, in terms of analytic products, I actually love Salesforce and Tableau. And I particularly feel like as a product manager, it is one of the tools that gives me so much power to have insight into my business. And for any product manager, I mean, my first 3 months on the job, I just spent a week or two just teaching myself everything I could in Salesforce, right? Because how quickly that you can get that going. Within the day, I got provisioned an account for my IT managers. I could run my own dashboards. I could get deep into customer sat issues by looking up tickets. They've really made it accessible to anyone in the business, right? So on the analytics side, I'd say Salesforce and Tableau. One product, which is one of your previous companies, is most recently at our company we were looking at how do we design a new age trial product. So how many clicks will it take for someone to actually try out our software for the first time? When we did this first exercise 4 years ago, it was still quite a manual effort. You had to do the install, they had to take an image, they had to put a license key. I mean, it's really the old way of doing it. So we were looking at models, and AppDynamics actually had one of the snazziest trial product experiences. Within 3 clicks of me logging in, I was able to actually get the SaaS product going, right? And that became a model for us. And so I'd say, especially for SaaS products, looking at other examples outside of your industry often helps to figure out, where exactly trial, for example, is a great place to see how quickly you can configure the product.
We did a lot of iterations on that. AppDynamics Lite.
Yeah, it was great.
So, maybe I'll give a little bit of a different view on just my experience at Splunk. Splunk started as an enterprise software company and saw the cloud wave coming, and we had to move quickly. And we had a few false starts, candidly, but and then we just saw viral adoption and growth. And I think at the core, and you guys really hit it, the SaaS experience needs to be just so fluid, easy to sort of ascertain what options you want in a way that's consumable, understandable. Try it, realize the value that you're looking for quickly. And so that trial experience, by the way, is not just here's the software. It's the experience of help me use your product to solve problems that I care about and try to accelerate that as quickly as possible in a few clicks as possible. 3 is pretty good. And then the transaction, because in this day and age, and especially when you're dealing with large organizations, there's still these large contracts that you deal with. But as you look at the SMB segment and certainly the lower mid-market, the folks that are buying SaaS services don't really want to interact with a salesperson or have the lengthy dialogue that is traditional to buying software. They want to transact quickly, use it. If they're not happy with it, move off of it. So trying to create an incredibly fluid experience that removes the friction, I think, is huge. And to the extent that we were able to do that end to end, we just saw just tremendous adoption. I don't know if it compares to Atlassian or some of the companies that you mentioned, but certainly it's become a very substantive part of Splunk's revenue and a big part of why you're seeing the valuation that they're getting today.
Thanks. With SaaS, you can get results immediately, right? You can see how you're performing, what's sticky. So tell me a little bit about how you prioritize features for your roadmap for growth when you're getting data inputs from everywhere now.
Sure, I can start. One thing I noticed, even for being at a B2B company, we were at 250 people. Then over time, we grew we're now 4,000 people. It was really easy to let the large customers prioritize your features. And you had to very intentionally make sure you weren't just always focusing on the large customers. I'd say one of the biggest pieces of lessons we've learned is as much as your large customers are going to sway your early business, how do you make sure that you're actually keeping in very close touch with more of the long tail of customers to make sure you're building features that can hit a lot of them? Because a lot of times large customers have very specific workload needs, very specific security needs, and you can become influenced. So the first thing I'd say is prioritize your time in terms of how much of your feature dedication and how much engineering capacity will be between large and small customers. The second is in terms of product features. When I joined as a product manager, I always thought features are the features people are clicking on. But your roadmap is as much as the actual product feature as it is the licensing strategy, the pricing strategy, the install experience, the trial experience. And so viewing your product as a holistic cycle and understanding in the sales cycle where exactly you're having gaps, you can focus on, right? So to give you an example, last year Nutanix decided we're going to move away from a purely on-premise appliance business, which is something customers keep in their data centers, to starting to move to a more software cloud-based model. And what we realized there was the real work there was actually in how our licensing was done. The more we could simplify our licensing, the more likely customers were to adopt this model. So we had to prioritize there based on licensing, not necessarily your core features every day that customers are utilizing, but the licensing pre-install, which we were to prioritize. So those are the two insights. First, large and small customers, and the second is making sure in the whole product life cycle, knowing what's important at what time for your company.
Well, I think she's spot on. I think one of the challenges, of course, is that you do over time need to cater to your customers. They're gonna ask for more, and you have to be sensitive to that in order to deliver an exceptional experience for them. But you can't let them drive your plans entirely. You have to think ahead and deliver the exceptional value that really is going to separate you from everybody else. And so, how do you balance the bottoms-up asks, which are going to be far more copious than your capacity to deliver, with the strategic plans that really help you deliver on the exceptional value and the separation in the market? It's a hard thing to do whether you're an on-prem software company or a SaaS company, but it's just so important. And the companies that are able to continue to do that, and I think Salesforce is an example of one, regardless of their size, win. And the folks that don't, sadly I've been part of some great companies that got acquired into large organizations that were not able to sort of stay ahead, and over time they lost. And so, I think there is a discipline of this function that becomes really important about investing time and effort and thinking strategically, thinking ahead, really having a point of view. You don't necessarily have all the answers, but a point of view of how you're going to win, and also being really close to your customers. And I think in SaaS, everything just moves a lot faster. So Agile is really important. Understanding your strategic initiatives is really important. Having a rich backlog that's reflective of all the critical priorities, including your customer needs, is important. And the ability to actually fail fast and try things and get out to a subset of your customers to get input before you do full rollout, that sort of agile execution becomes really important too. And these are all factors, I think, in how you stay ahead and maintain the balance that you need.
Yeah, I think you guys hit on almost all the core parts of the prioritization, so I'll add a little bit to it, but I couldn't agree more with everything that was shared. And I think one thing that you think about when you prioritize features has to do with the stage of the company that you're at. So when you're a much smaller, earlier stage company, then you have to focus. You need to be focused on your core space. There's dozens of things you can do, but you need to really establish velocity in the market that you're in to become like the best solution you can for that persona. And so, oftentimes you're having to make a lot of aggressive trade-offs to stick with. You may get, for example, at the company I work at now, we're a test automation company that uses AI to look at the digital application of enterprises. We've had a lot of requests come up for designers wanting to use our product, right? And so we could go and kind of build more value for designers, but we haven't really built enough value for the core test automation group where we can really accelerate our revenue and get more impact in the market. And so we have to make a strategic decision around that. When you're larger and you have a broader strategy, then you have kind of a little different prioritization where you're looking at more integration between services and more cohesion. That's something we saw at Dynamics, for example, which was after a certain point when the core product was mature and we had 6 other offerings that were coming out or were already in market and some new ones that were coming out. We had to think about how do we vertically integrate all these services to get most visibility for the end user. And oftentimes, you'll get a lot of customers will give you feedback from many different channels. Email, leads ticketing systems, leads through direct conversations, and I think you always want to spend as much time as you can with direct customers to get a lot of that really deep, insightful feedback and translate it to product requirements. But customers will give you customer requirements, and you need to be able to distill that to product requirements. And your product requirements needs to map to the strategy that you have, right? So your business will have a strategy, a product strategy. That needs to be translated to certain goals that you have for growth, and then those goals need to tie into what your roadmap is going to reflect, for where you're trying to take your product. And then your roadmap is, of course, consistent of different releases that are thematic, where you announce new things and new great things that continue to add more value in the market that you're in. So that's kind of like another slice to add on to like how you think about prioritizing features that you get a lot of in the field.
I think it's a really valid point that depending on the life stage of the companies, what you're all describing is that at the beginning you're dependent on perhaps a handful of customers who are driving all your revenue and you're building features for them. Like we're building a feature just for Microsoft in the early days at our billing company. And then of course as your product gets more mature and your customer base diversifies, you get less dependent on single customer, handful of customers, and you're really able to innovate. And one thing that resonates with me that everyone said is like thinking really big about where you want your product to go. And at Google, we talk about how do you go 10x? What are the crazy ideas that maybe nobody would ever spend money on this, but what would a 10x world look like? So if any of you have done 10x exercises or thought about your product that way, can you give the audience some advice? Because in the day of a PM, you're often just like running around trying to get things ready for your next release. How do you make the time to really think 10x and put together that awesome strategy?
Well, I can talk about something. So here we are at Rubrik. I'm 5 months in. The company's only 4 years old, and we're having these deep product strategy conversations about what are we going to do 4 years from now. I mean, how are we going to become we can become a multi-billion-dollar company, but I mean, how do we become sort of a staple of the enterprise software arena? The likes of Salesforce and Oracle, and what are some of the crazy things that we can do and start socializing that would take us there? And we've gone through this exercise. It's been, some of it actually is going to be shared at our board meeting tomorrow about some ideas. Unfortunately, I can't share them with you just yet. But some of the ideas about the next wave and the next wave after that, and how we're going to just become incredibly valuable to our customers. And that's really what it's about. How do we not just do great backup recovery, but deliver incremental value on top of that makes us really important to our customers, more so than a traditional backup recovery company might be. And then how do we create this exponential value over time where we build on it? And I think it's really fun. It's hard to carve time out for, but you have to do it, or if you don't have a thinking about how to communicate the value of what you're doing in a way that can be monetized by your customers is a really important exercise. And if you don't hit it right, it's always going to be an awkward dynamic. And pricing, if your customers are ever happy with your pricing, then you've done something wrong. I mean, by default, it never happens that way. And so, I think, would you agree? Yeah.
I would disagree.
You would? Okay, all right. She often disagrees with me, is often right. I think, and then you have to come up with a model that is simple and consumable, and I think having a complex pricing model is often hard to consume. And so, I think those are some of the foundational things that we've thought about, how to monetize our value in a way that really makes sense, and then how to keep it simple and uniform as companies expand their usage of your offerings. Now, Judy, tell me how ours work.
Well, okay, so I think pricing is part of our science, and that you really never know if you have it wrong, right? Because it's very difficult to A/B test pricing. I wanted to A/B test pricing at Google on one of our products, and the lawyer shot me down. So what we would do is try to predict based on surveys we would conduct, which are obviously very imperfect ways of predicting how people respond to pricing changes. But during my time at Google, we did have a product where it was global price for G Suite, which is very unfair to people in certain countries where income levels are much, much lower. So we were looking at the Indian market, and the prices were 90% lower than what we were charging. So we did this audacious move. We dropped pricing by 70%, and then we all put bets in what's going to happen to paid seat growth once we do this. Will paid seat growth offset pricing? And we were very happily surprised to see the results of that. We were really worried about things like arbitrage, people gaming the system, getting that India license price where they were not in India, and have put in a bunch of thought into what were anti-abuse vectors. We would look at it that we started to see that. But it was interesting because we actually didn't see that abuse happening, at least at the time that I was on the team. It will be different now. So I disagree with you on that, like people are happy that you've given them too much credit pricing, because we did make people really happy, and we were also really happy with that move.
I was just going to add one quick thing to that. I mean, we actually did, at our company, we actually did a big pricing analysis and review, and we're actually going to be looking to change our pricing a little bit. And so what we learned was actually from the user research interview sessions we did with our pricing with some of our customer advisory members and some of the more tenured customers we've had for a while, a lot of them actually felt that we could charge more. But what we actually found was the value-based metric that we're basing our pricing on was not aligned with most of the users and most of the practitioners. And so we started to change. We actually found that our value-based metric is not what we thought it was. And so we have now started to look at changing that. And of course, changing the pricing can have there's definitely a lot of go-to-market activities that fall into that kind of a change, because you have existing customers, but then you have new customers. You have to train a new sales team with like a new kind of a sizing and SKU-based mechanics for how they're building the value and trying to sell the deal. And so, we're going to go through that exercise now, but oftentimes what some of the research I've looked at in this space particularly has shown is, usually if you do change your pricing and you do come up with something new, it's not always that disruptive. I mean, sometimes if you're able to iterate it in a way that actually is more structured to the actual value that the end user is getting from your solution, then I think oftentimes it's going to help you in the long term. It becomes the right move because it allows you to not just adopt but expand and review in a more scalable way with those users. And around the go-to-market, one other kind of thing that I've seen done really well that's actually helped us even at my current firm is really this notion of ICP. So one thing that we did when I joined is we're a team of like 10 people, so we didn't have like a very good foundation around the core audience that we want to go after. And so ICP really stands for Ideal Customer Profile. What we did is we did a lot of exercise to understand what is our ideal customer from a firmographic standpoint, from a geographic standpoint, from a technographic standpoint, like what are the technologies that we support that we know we can excel in an environment that so-and-so enterprises are in, right? We know that that's where we'll get the lowest CAC, the lowest customer acquisition cost to get the product adopted as quickly as possible and grow the value quickly and improve our conversion essentially. So that's that's a useful exercise that I found. Just something that you can think about is really honing in and trying to understand not just from user research sessions, but from your internal product capability and feature value. What is your core market and what does that ideal customer look like for you? And then getting your go-to-market and sales team to really focus on that persona to really exhaustively win where you're going to have the best chance to win.
I think that's so important with new product introduction, so that you can really gain that momentum that you need before expanding. So, spot on.
Okay, so since we're at an AWIP event, I'm curious how many women PMs there are as a percentage of total PMs in your company.
So glad I did.
I think we're in a very technical space, like more companies for the most part.
Defending just the number.
Honestly, the number is lower than it should be, for sure. And I'm at a very small company right now with the transition, so we only have a couple PMs. So on my team, we don't have any women PM yet. But at AppDynamics, it was a few. I think even during my time when I left, we had about 20 PMs, and only and there was only about three women PMs. So and I think there's a lot more initiatives that I'm starting to see in the industry around driving that growth. I was talking to one of our board members at a board meeting last week from OpenView, and they actually started this Athena Alliance. They partnered with this nonprofit Athena Alliance to actually start to get more representation of women executives on the board of the companies that they fund. And so I think there's a lot of through that, some of the metrics that they found is actually there's more women now getting on boards of companies that are helping businesses evolve the right way. And we think about the end user and persona in almost any vertical today. I think the gender diversity is starting to get more balanced. So you need more women leaders that can actually give the perspective and the evolution and the innovation that a business is going to bring to market.
So we have about 60 PMs and we have 4 female product managers. 60 PMs. 60. We have 60 PMs. We're 4,000 people, employees. I think we have 4 product managers. Yeah, that are females. Yeah. And the company over the last 2 years has started to emphasize a lot on general hiring best practices. I think there's 2 sides to it. One's hiring, obviously, but the other is also coaching, retaining, and promoting existing women, right? And so those are the 2 angles that we have taken a lot of efforts in now to to grow. But I'd say this space has a lot to still be done. I would say though, my own personal experience. I think if you are a female in B2B, it's a great, powerful seat to be in because there's not a lot of you, right? So having that perspective and bringing that fresh viewpoint to the table, especially for a company that appreciates that, I think can be quite uplifting. When I first came into enterprise, it used to really bother me, especially when I was the only female and also usually youngest by 15 years in a room and trying to get my voice heard. It used to really bother me, and they'd be customers, and once the customer meeting said, I never knew enterprise had kids right out of college that came, right? And you were just kind of shocked at some of the comments that were made, but over time, as I got to know customers better and our sales teams better, that viewpoint really helped me differentiate myself, right? And what I'd say is at my company, in terms of mentorship, I really have great mentors and sponsors, and they really advise me on the day-to-day how to grow as a product manager, but I found my female networks outside of the company, right? So organizations like this are obviously fantastic, but you don't always have to find everything in one place.
Great advice.
Awesome. So with April joining my team, we are 3 females out of a team of 13. Thank you.
That's actually pretty good.
Let me just say this. Judy and I worked together 15 years ago. Some of the best product managers and product management leaders that I work with, and I will tell you, not just because she's sitting here, Judy is certainly one of them, have been female. And I think, there are 2 sides to this. One is I think companies are at a loss for not having a better balance because truly there's some exceptional talent there, and it is so leaning towards the male gender that I think the company is at a loss. But also, to your point, I just saw a Wall Street Journal article a week ago that highlighted that in California, there's consideration of regulation to require women on boards, and I think that. So I think there's just a general movement of this issue of diversity is important. It's unfair and when it's imbalanced, but also I would say from my experience, companies really are so much better for it when they invest in it. So by the way, we're hiring. A shameless plug. Any of you that are looking, please let us know. But I really do think it's a very important subject for us to continue to focus on.
It's not just enterprise, right? I'm on a consumer team right now, and
No wonder people like the price.
no, that was not on the enterprise. But I'm on a consumer team, and I'm one of 14. The only woman that's on the company. And the last team I was on, there was 3.5 women because one of the ladies was working part time, and so she's half. Yeah, so she's 3.5 over 27 women. So. Not great. Cool. So those are all the prepared questions I had. I threw in some zingers, so thanks for rolling with me on that. And I know that Nancy wanted to make sure we had time to open up the floor for Q&A as well. So if any of you have questions for any of these esteemed panelists, please. Okay. The lady in yes.
So I guess the mic. Who wants to ask a question? My name is Shay. Hi, I'm a PM at Couchbase and B2B product. So I have a question. So how do you, when you launch a new product, so how much of an ownership does a PM take on getting the new customers? Like what is the division between sales, selling it, and versus like my manager asked me like, okay, give me the commitment that you have at least 5 customers by end of this quarter. So what ownership does a PM take versus a sales leader takes for that match?
So I used to work for a company called Opsware. The CEO was Ben Horowitz.
I have read that book, Hard Things About Hard
Hard Thing About Hard Things. I was there during the heyday, and Ben Horowitz was a former product manager and turned CEO. And he had very strong views on the role of product management. And he used to talk often about the product manager needs to be the CEO of the product. And I think he was spot on. And that ultimately, if we are product managers are the nucleus of an organization. We ultimately drive and guide the entirety of the company. And otherwise the company can't succeed, in my view. And I think. And so with that, I do think there needs to be some level of ownership and responsibility for understanding all the things that are required to drive those 5 new customers and where we go from there. And you have to invest yourself in that in addition to understanding customer requirements and driving all of that. Now, clearly, you're not the CEO, and those salespeople don't report into you, and you can't deliver that number without their own execution. But I do think there is a mind shift element of feeling a level of responsibility for it that ends up driving a difference in behavior around partnership, around engagement, around doing everything you can to support them. And I think that's a very healthy thing to do. So anyway, that's a very ambiguous answer to your question. But ultimately, I think it is healthy to feel a level of ownership and be measured on that for those reasons.
Okay, so apart from the sales enablement material, it's more about that personal connection that you build to see what can be done better.
Yes, so you're going to do everything it takes to drive that number, and it's in partnership with sales and everybody else to achieve the business outcome, which ultimately no one is going to own better than the product manager.
And often your early customers are going to become your best counsel as you grow your product, right? So they're going to become more thought partners versus a customer you're selling to. So we have every quarter, every month actually, we do a virtual customer panel. And they give us feedback, our closest customer, and we're really open with them. And that's what I think early on, when they feel like they're actually a thought partner with you versus a customer, that's when you sometimes get the best insights.
Yeah, one thing that I'll briefly add is I think spot on with things that Shay and Nikita shared, but as a product leader trying to take something to market, you're going to have to be like that customer voice, and so you need to have like the most customer empathy and making sure that what you're taking to market is actually going to add the level of value that you thought it would, and you'll iterate and you'll improve. And so sales alone, kind of the execution side around like let's make money on this. Because sales is very driven also from the commission standpoint. They're driven by making deals, making quotas. It's a slightly different organization that way. But you're kind of like, as a product person, you're kind of like the mini CEO of like the company in that sense. If you holistically own this, and I love the nucleus example. I've used a different example in the past, which is probably a bit more childish, but I think of the product team as like kind of like the glue in a puzzle. If you think about a puzzle, and you have different pieces that complete it. You have your sales, marketing, design, engineering, customer success. Product is kind of like the glue because you have to cohesively work with all of these organizations to holistically own it. And without the glue, the puzzle falls apart, right? So you have to own end to end and really lead a lot of it by influence because not everyone's no one's really reporting to you directly, but. And you start building that relationship and building that trust, not just with your internal teams, but with the customer, you get recognized as a leader and you're driving the direction. And you just have to kind of obviously measure the right KPIs and measure the right metrics so you know that you're driving in the right direction with the product that you're launching.
Thank you. Representative.
Maybe just ask Hey everyone, my name is Valerie. So I am a new product manager as in a month in, and I have a consumer marketing background. So going back to your beginnings of your career as a product manager, what advice would you give people new to the space and maybe being sold out for?
I can answer that a bit. So I actually came from a product marketing background and then I went into product management. I actually have an economics background, so I have not, I don't have the typical computer science background that most folks in my field did. I did consulting for enterprise and I started with product marketing and then got into product management. My first manager, the best advice he gave me is, it's really important to know your space beyond your product. So I think the natural thing for a lot of folks, and for me too, was like, let me learn the ins and outs of my current product, right? What he had me focus on actually was understanding the ecosystem. So things like, there's a lot of easy resources to get to that, right? So things like Gartner MQ reports, for example, give you a really good lay of the land. Starting to attend or listen into customer conversations, as well as understanding, I've listened to customer escalations as well. That's a really easy way for you to understand pain points as well as things people like about your product, right? So support cases, for example. Attending some industry conferences, virtually or in person. These are some easy ways to start to get a lay of the land before you just deep dive into your own product.
So I likewise do not have a traditional PM background. I was a finance major undergrad and got into BA, not technical at all. And so at my first PM job, I had no idea what I was doing. I literally was like, what am I supposed to do? What's the requirements document? How do I write this? Don't I just say, build me something better, And so my advice is to find a friend, find somebody more seasoned than you who's willing to help you. And there are lots of those people out there. If you're just very open about where you need help, you will find it. There's also tons of information online, a lot of resources these days that weren't available when I first started on how to build a lot of these roadmaps and how to do prioritization. The second thing I would say to do is to ask your engineering manager where you could be the most help to them. It may be just going through old bugs, or it may be getting on customer calls that they don't want to participate in, but you will find out very quickly what role they will be playing on the team if you ask.
Yeah, and I think it can definitely be daunting at first coming into those shoes, but I think everything that was shared is spot on with how you want to kind of look at ramping up. I would just add that just get kind of immersed into the space as much as you can. Just become as passionate as you can about wanting to learn about the ecosystem, what differentiates your offering from other solutions there, and better understanding of the value that customers are getting from your product. So obviously become intimately familiar with your product as well to understand how what are the different features, how are customers using it, and then any insight you can start to drive from how customers are actually using the product will give you even more context to like the next steps that you're kind of bringing in your roadmap and in your journey of evolving the product and contributing to it.
Great stuff. I think it's a great question. Judy, by the way, ended up being one of the best product management leaders in a highly technical arena of
billing for internet services. Just think about that for a moment. But here's the thing, in my mind, at the end of the day, the role of product management is not about features and functions. It's about understanding the customer and delivering an exceptional solution to their problem. And so I think I agree with everything that you've heard here, but also, I mean, to the extent that you immerse yourself in that customer world and understand their pain and their problems and the things that they need to do, and what is success for them, gives you the ability to bring back to the team a view that I think ultimately is what's going to drive what the focus should be. And so, so in addition to everything you've heard, and I think listening to the customer support calls and doing whatever, by the way, that's a very enterprise-centric view that I'm sharing with you, maybe a little different than to decide, but to me that is really paramount.
Hi, my name is Olivia. First, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your being here. All the answers were super insightful. So I have a couple questions related to scaling. So I understand your companies are going through rapid growth. So I'm wondering, what do you guys do as a product manager to assist that rapid growth? And also, what do you do on a personal level to make sure that you are able to keep up with the growth?
Sure. Yeah, so I joined our company at 250, and now we're at 4,000. I think a few things I had to do. It's really easy to get into your day-to-day and be really headquarters focused. That's what I've noticed. And so for me, some of my biggest learnings have been when I have pushed myself out. So for example, I asked, can I spend 3 months in our Amsterdam office, right? And I sat there, I attended meetings, I was often the only person from headquarters there, and that put me in a completely different mindset of understanding our European customers, right? Another example was starting to attend more industry conferences, as I mentioned, and starting to actually talk to analysts and different folks that I wasn't seeing in my day-to-day. In terms of like my own knowledge things, I think one of the things I found hard as a product manager is as a company scales with multiple products, you actually have to get good at learning these products and keeping up to date with them, because it's so easy to be deep diving into your just your main product, right? And so, as I mentioned, I usually always lead a hackathon team, right? So for me, I find 10 engineers in different areas, and we go and do something totally different. So for me, that's been a great way to get exposure to different technologies. One other thing I've been doing is, as we've been acquiring companies, I actually just sit down usually for an hour, do a cold reach out to the founder of that company and hear how their story is. Because once I understand their acquisitions, that really helps me paint a better value picture for even the customers I'm working with. Right? So starting to use your internal network at the company every week, meeting with someone in sales or engineering or support to make sure that you're not just laser focused in headquarters in your own bubble. And the best thing about a scaling company is you have all these new people around you that you can access.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things I've seen in scaling companies is, organizationally things change. You start in the early startup days. When I was at Broadbase and Portal, we had like 4 or 5 product managers, and we're kind of doing everything. We're very close-knit. And when we grew, I think we eclipsed 40 people or something like that in Bob's organization. And suddenly you have organizational silos, even in product management. And so it creates a lot of stress in some ways to be able to move quickly, work well together, really drive things that are important to the business because there's so many dependencies. And being really thoughtful about that, as a leader, it's so important to think ahead and make sure that we're not going to create organizational friction, and we have organizational design in mind that's going to enable scale. And it tends to be outcome oriented. What are the most important things we have to optimize for, and how do we organize around that? And that to me is quite critical.
I forgot one thing I was going to say, but we do, and I think many companies do OKRs, right? Objectives and keynotes. So, and we also have, annual planning, and then first half, second half planning. So those are great ways to see what the priorities are for the top things that the organization is going to be working on. we also have a set of standing meetings every week called product review meetings and design review meetings, where different teams come and do their updates. And they're meant to be non-fancy, ugly slides, 15 minutes, bullets, quick demo, but that helps keep everyone aware of at least what different parts of the org are building, and also what features you could try to steal with pride from another team rather than try to build yourself.
Just one, I'll add to that. I mean, this is even a lot of this I've also seen in my career too. One thing that I saw at Nutanix was that when we had a very kind of innovative culture in the company, and so we did a lot of hackathons. We tried a lot of things, and when we failed, and we iterated quickly. But as we built new products outside the core solution, we kind of had the startup within a startup kind of mentality in how we built it, and so there wasn't a lot of collaboration initially with a lot of the new products that came out. And we got to a point where we're looking to get hyperscale, and we're looking to sell new offerings on top of the existing solution they have, while upselling the existing solution to more and more services and users. As a PM, what I kind of had to do was really start communicating and building more of a collaboration cadence between the different product teams. And so one thing that so I started to realize very quickly at Nutanix was that we need to be more aligned and coordinated more closely as a product team, so we kind of get rid of the startup and the startup thing and start to cohesively look at how does the entire product get universalized, and how can we sell everything together to the end user as a stack that provides end-to-end visibility, right? So, because we were still selling to the same persona, we didn't look at, we were still selling into the DevOps monitoring market with the product, but different products provide a different level of visibility. I mean, core solution was all about the application, but there was a solution for database, there was a solution for infrastructure, for end users. But a lot of it actually, you could pair it together and it gave you end-to-end visibility. And so you had to unify it. And because of the startup kind of design that we had initially, there was a lot of that cross-product collaboration that wasn't there initially, and we had to really push that out and really build that out. And I think now you're starting to, today the company sees a lot of growth from that, but that was a big scaling limitation initially, of course.
Hi, my name is Namrata. I'm a product manager from NetApp. I really appreciate all your insights today. Enterprise B2B is certainly exciting. I have two quick questions. One is, Nikita and Shay, particularly you said you went from on-prem to SaaS, and I'm sure you've seen the resistance to change when it comes to operationalizing subscription software or even building SaaS, because people go from a 6-month release cadence to 2-week sprints. Now, how do you, in your role, does it ever seem to you like an uphill battle when you're steering a battleship because things are so steeped in traditional processes and you're trying to change a lot of things? And how do you motivate the engineering team, aside from talking about customers and the revenue and the impact that they're delivering in SaaS, and convince them that fast moving is better than bursts of activity? And two, how do you say no to customers gracefully?
Look, I will tell you, in all of my experiences, I've only been part of companies that have transitioned from software to SaaS. Most recently, I was at Splunk, as I mentioned, that was initially an on-prem software company that evolved to SaaS. MuleSoft also recently acquired by Salesforce, software to SaaS, and it is really, really hard. It is really hard. It's hard because of the engineering process that you talked about. You don't deliver every 9 months now. You've got to deliver it continuously to stay ahead. There's so many things that fundamentally have to change in the processes, and it's a major uphill battle. And I think there needs to be a decision at the top of the company. This is really important because it affects everybody. It affects your pricing. It affects revenue. You're moving to term subscriptions. No one buys perpetual licenses as a cloud SaaS service. It affects your go-to-market, your marketing. It affects everything, and it has to be a concerted effort. And most companies fail because they're not willing to really roll up their sleeves and drive hard. And so what you can do, assuming your company is committed to it, I think what you can do as a product manager is really, I guess first and foremost, recognize things don't happen overnight. You can't go from a 1-year release cycle where your engineering team hands off to an integration team, to a doc team, to a QA team, and you've got a very, you have a sort of a waterfall model with agile vernacular, which many of us have, and move to a true agile company where you're continuously delivering product every 4 weeks. It's going to take time. So the thing I would say is figure out what are the right first steps to take in that process. Get a backlog and groom it together really, really well. So at least there's a constant sense of what's most important. And then maybe tackle a continuous agile process where you're doing integration testing and building doc and getting to an endpoint at the end of a sprint. Maybe the first sprint is 4 weeks, it's not 2 weeks. But at the end of that sprint, you get to a hardened output. Take the steps, the big steps, incrementally, and then I think that's the only way to really get to the right endpoint. And it's a journey, it's a marathon. Doesn't happen overnight. And in every case I've been a part of, it's taken years to truly get to the endpoint.
Have like a new CTO come in or new technology leadership come in to make that kind of shift?
I would say both in the case of Splunk and MuleSoft, there were a lot of organizational changes during this period. I think it's a good thing that it happened because that's the level of commitment the leadership team at the very highest level of the company were to the effort. And when things did not go well and people in important roles were not executing in the way that they need to, they didn't deliver the commitments they made, they didn't show the right effort and intent, they didn't last very long. And companies that are not willing to take that hard of a line end up with people that are not going to move the needle, and then it's impossible to make it to the endpoint. So yeah, it's a tough journey. But we in product management are in the middle of that. We're the nucleus, the glue. And so I think helping to guide and helping identify what are the steps we can take, and how does this journey sort of what are the important steps that we can take stepwise to get to that right outcome, knowing it's going to take years, but not willing to compromise on the most important things now, and helping to partner with the different organizations that are affected by this. I mean, it's the only way. That's how I think you can have the impact that you want to have.
Yeah, I mean, that was fantastic. That covers a lot of the key points. I'd say on the customer side, also try to figure out how this could actually benefit the customer, right? So a lot of times it's easy because the company wants to increase the valuation or it's the right thing to do for the financial analyst, but there's actually times or certain parts of your product that could actually benefit from being on a SaaS model. So in our case, when we moved to this actually from on-premise to software model, in this case, we were actually, when we did this transition, able to make our license transferable for the customer so that they could actually transfer the licenses, which they could not do in an on-premise model, right? So by having that extra value add, that transition became appealing to certain customers who really wanted that flexibility. Similarly, there's a product of ours that customers have always been asking, is there a way you can move to SaaS? And we this year decided that, hey, this product's actually been, a lot of customers have been asking for us to move to SaaS. Why don't we make this our beachhead that goes into SaaS, right? So one is, how can you identify the customer benefit? The second thing is exactly what Shay said. It took us like 2 years to get this done, and the whole time it felt like a shaky ship, like what are we doing? And the more and more as a product manager, you can be aware of that and recognize that. So saying to your team, look, I know this is going to be a shaky year. We're all in it together. We have a war room going. We're going to get through this. The more people can be aware that this is going to be a massive change management effort, I think the people realize this doesn't have to be perfect from day one. And always having alpha testers. And just as you do a SaaS transition, we're doing a transition right now. We have what we're calling a beta. We have sales reps getting compensated who make deals happen, like with the SaaS model. In the interim, they get a spiff. By having a beta like that, you can also kind of slowly trickle out the effects and have a few of the sales teams become the torchbearers So now we have them presenting and talking about how they defended the value of the solution, right? So kind of phasing it out.
Just one quick thing, which is interesting because I saw this at my previous firm at Nutanix where we weren't releasing as quickly as we wanted to. We weren't as agile as we wanted to. We built kind of a monolithic technology stack, and what that led to was not having the release cadence that we wanted. So as a product person, you're leading by influence, but when you've established that trust with engineering, they're going to rely on you to tell them what they need to build so they can execute on the how. You can tell them, let's spend the whole year building features and not spending any time in architecture or re-architecting the service to be more performant, more scalable, right? So you kind of have to own a little bit of responsibility around this too, and make sure that there's no point adding more features if the server crashes. The performance of the product is so slow or latent that end users aren't getting the satisfaction they need. So I read various different articles and books as well from experience with different product leaders at companies in the past. I mean, you often do want to allocate a little bit of time in every release for the engineering team to be focused on re-architecting and re-engineering the platform so that it can be more scalable for the next set of features that you bring on. So you should kind of feel some level of ownership around that, so that you don't end up leading the product, the engineering team to only build features and not have the right velocity and architecture to scale. And it was interesting because when I went to the company I'm at now, we were at such an agile pace, being a much newer company, that we were releasing features faster than the sales and customer success teams were getting trained on. So sometimes they were learning about features for the customers. And customers were like, "Oh, yeah, we're using this." They're like, "Oh, what does this do?" And it was like, so you need a healthy cadence. Yeah, it can be a bittersweet thing, but you want that healthy cadence. But I had to kind of come in and own that and say, okay, we're going to put some process around how we enable our teams before we release, and make sure that they're enabled to help the customer succeed before these kind of new features in the SaaS side go to market. Because in SaaS, in the cloud SaaS world, you can push things really quickly, right? And you need to make sure that you're, at least in the enterprise space, which is a little different from B2C, you want to make sure that your enterprise users are enabled with the new functionality and you don't break anything, you don't cause any kind of confusion or issue, because each of these enterprise users is paying you a couple of grand a month or a year, right? So your average revenue per user is much higher as opposed to B2C world. So you need to be a lot more cognizant of that velocity and training and turning your internal teams to make your customers be successful.
So I realize we're out of time, and it's a weeknight, and you guys have to get up early in the morning, but we are available and we'll be around to meet. So please, if you have more questions, chat with us, but we'll officially end the program with a formal panel now. Thank you.